When does Brexit mean Brexit? The British people have voted to end a 40-year integration with their European neighbours. But since then, nothing much has happened, except the legal process to bring about the separation has ended up in the courts. What does the rest of Europe think of this? Does the delayed detachment affect the rest of the world very much, or at all? I'm Martin Stanford. This is Insight. Welcome to Insight. It's 5 months since the people of Britain voted to leave the European Union. The Brexit vote sent shockwaves through stock markets and saw David Cameron quit as the country's Prime Minister. But since then, essentially nothing has happened. The arguments are still being played out, economists are still divided, and now the process is being bogged down in the law courts. In this programme, we'll debate the global effect of Brexit so far. But first, Insight's Dana Lewis has been investigating its impact in Britain.
Business in the UK rolls on, unable to plan for what appears to be inevitable, but so far impossible to navigate: Brexit.
You were originally not overly happy about Brexit?
No, I was shocked. I was very shocked. And I was worried about the uncertainty it would create.
Faisal Ramatullah runs Plastics Capital, and a walk through his factory in Wellingborough, north of London, tells you a lot about business dilemmas pending Britain's exit from the EU. Here they produce widgets and key plastics for assembly lines. It's a $60 million a year business. The company has 5 factories in England and 2 more in China and another in Thailand. Since the Brexit vote in June, the UK currency, the pound, has tumbled. And that's meant great business gains for those exports becoming cheaper for foreign buyers.
You know, the currency change, which is really the only significant change that anyone really knows about at the moment, has made we export, roughly speaking, 50% of what we sell goes overseas from our factories, and we've become overnight very competitive. Obviously, we've also benefited from the fact that some of our sales this year are going to be translated at a much better exchange rate.
The one thing that businesses don't like is economic uncertainty, and because of Brexit, there's plenty of that. But some things just don't show up in raw economic data, like skilled labor. This factory in Wellingborough is 4 times more productive than a similar factory in China.
But productivity is a small part of the picture. Looking ahead, Faisal says if trade tariffs are imposed on UK exports, that could be a serious obstacle to business.
20% of what we sell goes to EU countries, roughly speaking. The tariffs, you know, small tariffs, 5%, wouldn't affect us because our products are pretty competitive, quite specialist. But if we're talking 20%, then that's a different ballgame.
But how high will possible European trade tariffs be? What will they be on? Who knows? And that's why Faisal welcomes a parliamentary debate on Brexit ordered by the courts and now under appeal to the Supreme Court.
Of course.
The ruling says Prime Minister Theresa May can't unilaterally pull the trigger on Article 50, the mechanism to leave the EU, not without a parliamentary debate.
To deliver on the will of the British people and to deliver Brexit.
So just down the road in Main Street, Wellingborough, it's a Brexit bewilderment, an area where the majority of citizens voted out in the referendum.
Well, I just want to know, obviously we were told it takes possibly 2 years and something about Article 50, why it's taken so long, and is it first of all going to happen?
A lot of people intent on stopping things happening.
It's happening, but it's not a proper timescale. You know, for me, I would like to see more action, quicker, faster, more decisive.
Do you think that the procedural delays are reasonable, or do you think they're undemocratic?
Undemocratic.
Several British newspapers ran provocative headlines criticizing the court's decision and attacking the judges personally, even calling them enemies of the people. A member of Parliament for Wellingborough, Peter Bone, called the headlines nonsense, but predicted the Supreme Court will also order that Brexit goes to a vote in Parliament.
I think we should be debating in Parliament. Parliament would clearly carry it in both houses, and we should get on and do that. Again, that is it's these red herrings that keep being put up. The truth of the matter is, if we had it in Parliament now, we'd be on the process of getting it done, so let's put it in Parliament. If I never mind this city court case, put a bill in Parliament this week and crack on.
But if the pro-Brexit camp thinks progress is slow now, some legal and government experts think it could take years.
I think it's almost certain that there will be a delay and further delay. And I think it's fair to say that the longer this is delayed, that the more unlikely I think any Brexit will happen. I mean, I'm on record thinking that a full Brexit isn't going to happen. I don't think for a moment the government is going to withdraw entirely from the European Union.
Faisal notes while many UK businesses have suspended plans to reinvest in their operations, his company made the decision to go ahead with reinvesting.
Clearly, currency is one of the reasons for that, but you know, sometimes change creates opportunity, and this is a major change. And I think you have to move fast, invest, and take advantage of those opportunities.
And this chairman of the board is the son of immigrants. He came to Britain from Iraq when he was 9 years old. On an emotional level, he says this about closing borders and pulling back from Europe.
It doesn't feel good. It really doesn't feel good. You know, my parents came to the UK because it was a free country, democratic country, not riven with all the difficulties that existed in Iraq even then, all those years ago. So it doesn't feel good. I still think the majority of people in this country, you know, are not turning their backs on democracy and freedom. They just want to see some level of control on immigration and things like that.
Faisal's life has been about adapting. Brexit is just another significant challenge. I'm Dana Lewis reporting for Insight.
Well, to discuss that further, I'm joined now by Eunice Goes, who's Associate Professor of Politics at Richmond University, and Ian Dale, the radio host, publisher and political commentator. Does this delay matter, Ian?
Well, the delay isn't really a delay. The Prime Minister has said that she'll trigger Article 50, which starts the 2-year negotiating period, by the end of March. She hasn't gone away from that commitment yet. It's possible, depending on what Parliament does, that she could, I suppose. But I think there'll be all hell to pay if she did, because, as she says, she's got to obey the will of the people. The majority voted for Brexit. She didn't. She backed Remain, although rather tepidly. So I think the timetable will stick.
And the law court's complication factor here, which plays out next week here in the United Kingdom. Are you one of those who said the law courts and the judges should butt out of this? It's none of their business, really?
Well, I don't like it when the judiciary gets involved in political matters. However, they have issued their findings, and I think if you believe in democracy, if you believe in the judiciary, you've got to accept that finding. Now, I think the government should have just accepted it, not appealed, and just introduced a very short bill into Parliament, and that would have been it. But instead, they have appealed. We won't know till I think the beginning of January what the result of that is appealed to the Supreme Court, and then they've really got to crack on with the Parliament, assuming they lose the appeal, which I think they will. They've really got to crack on with the getting the bill into Parliament.
There is a lesson here, Eunice, though, isn't there? It's an interesting example of where parliamentary democracy, through elected members of a government, or rather elected members of a parliament, some of whom make up a government, and the law and judges intersect. Now, is that just something for political geeks and students of politics, or do you think other people have a view too?
It shouldn't be really be, because courts and independent courts are a cornerstone of democracy. So sometimes you need the Supreme Court or the equivalent of a Supreme Court to tell politicians, to tell the executive that there is such thing as a constitution, there are constitutional principles, and this is exactly what happened. We had the High Court deciding that actually Parliament should be the institution that has the last say on this matter. So the assertion of parliamentary sovereignty, which ironically was the main cause against Europe that many Eurosceptics in Britain had been fighting for many years, so asserting the authority of Parliament over the authority of the European Union. So it's important that people understand that actually courts are not interfering or intervening in order to make life difficult for politicians.
Well, they were asked for their opinion, weren't they?
Yes, they are there to upheld democracy.
What do you think?
To upheld democracy, to make sure that the right institutions are participating in decisions.
But knowing that, at least in some part, there was mischievousness afoot here, that perhaps they were motivated not just to sort out a point of law, but actually to try and delay or frustrate the will of the British people, do you think the judges were allowed to be hijacked? into making decisions that were for that purpose?
I think the ruling was impeccably legal. It was shrouded in legal and constitutional language. It has been interpreted in a different way, but the interpretation is being made by other people other than judges. So I think it's important to bear that in mind, and I think the tabloid press has had a massive role in actually trying to politicize judges and portraying them as enemies of democracy, and this couldn't have been further from the truth.
How ironic all that is, Ian. Why do you think the government of the day didn't do what you suggested, which is just say, OK, this is a bit of paperwork we need to do. There it is, rubber stamp that, let's move on?
I don't know, because I cannot see the logic of their position. Eunice is absolutely right that judges are there to interpret the law. The politicians make the law, and if there's any doubt, then the judges are there to make the final decision. That's what they did. However, where I think I do disagree is there was mischief afoot. I mean, all of these people who say, well, of course I respect the will of the British people, but there's always a but at the end of that sentence. These people who brought this action, and they were quite entitled to do it, but they all want to see Britain stay in the European Union. That is their agenda. They think this will frustrate that process, and to a certain extent they've been successful.
The only decision of the judges was actually to assert, it was not to stop Brexit, but to say, hang on a minute, it's Parliament who has to take that decision.
Yeah.
There has to be a vote in Parliament.
But in a further complication, and to the bemusement of our neighbours and the rest of the world, and perhaps to the frustration of the businessmen we saw in our film, this further delays things, and the Supreme Court may overturn that and say the government doesn't have to do this, they can just motor on and get it done by next spring.
They can, theoretically, but I agree with Ian in a sense that I believe that the Supreme Court is going to uphold the decision of the High Court.
You think it will?
I think it will, but I think more importantly what this shows, or at least or maybe obfuscates, is the fact that the government is not prepared at all to start Brexit. The civil service is in a utter mess. They need to recruit 300,000 more people to start.
The report said 30,000.
30,000. That's quite a lot of people.
It's rubbish.
It's quite a lot of people.
It was not a government report. It was Deloitte who were wanting to get jobs for themselves. It was written by a junior member of staff.
I've been speaking with civil servants, top civil servants that used to work with Theresa May when she was in the Home Office, and the sense that they have is of sheer panic because no one knows where to begin, how to start, how to action.
Is another man's big in tray, isn't it?
Of course.
Of course.
Law firms and accountancy firms, this is going to be wonderful for them.
It would be fair to say, Ian, that the presumption was it would be probably a narrow yes, wasn't it? So this, the rejection took most people by surprise.
Yeah, and the government had no plans. I interviewed George Osborne, the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, the week before the vote, and I asked him, how many civil servants have you got in the Treasury planning for Brexit? Yeah. And his answer was none.
None, right.
And that would have been the same across government because they weren't expecting it. However, to say that there's chaos and nobody knows what they're doing, nobody knows what Brexit means, that's because the Prime Minister refuses to tell us. And in a way, you can understand why, because at the moment she gives any detail, that gives information to the European Commission and it undermines the negotiations.
But there's only so many positions that the British government can have, and the European Union can guess them all. So this idea of keeping the cards close to their chests, it's a bluff that it's not really working. What this shows, I think of course, there's only so many positions that you can have in terms of the negotiating strategy of the British government. What this shows is that the British government has not yet agreed on a common position, a position with which everyone agrees.
Right.
The government is divided.
Everyone is never going to agree
about what Brexit means.
But the government has delegated, if you like, the work to 3 leading politicians. No doubt the Prime Minister will
can't agree on what Brexit means.
How do you know that? On what basis do you know that they don't agree?
By
do you know any of them?
By the public statements that they've made about the meaning of Brexit, about what they meant.
I know all 3 of them, Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox, and I can assure you that there is no disagreement between them at all on the strategy and what they want to achieve by it. Just because they don't go to the newspapers and give interviews every day of the week on it, that doesn't mean to say that there isn't a common position.
So what is the image that they sent to the rest of the world, and in particular to other European countries, that that the British government is clueless about how to proceed
Well,
with Brexit.
is it
That
maybe
it,
that we
it
shouldn't
shouldn't
believe
be,
all you read in the newspaper?
it should not
Maybe,
be
do
a
you think we're
diplomatic.
seeing this through the prism of what the media and certain sections of the media want us to hear? Let me ask you that question and then leave it hanging there, because we're going to continue to this in next part of our programme, when we need to think about the rest of the world, really, and those business people. You're watching Insight. We're going to stay with Brexit in part 2. What does it mean for the rest of the world, in particular, the rest of Europe?